Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
From Srimad Bhagavatam, on Canto 4, Chapter 30, verses we're going to cover today are 8 through 16. Oh, did I say 16? 8 through 16? Okay. Yeah, 8 through 16. And we are, as Lokram introduced us yesterday, we're getting into the pastime of Prachetas, wherein the Prachetas have just finished performing their austerities within the water and are now being instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So verse 8. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Varam Vrindivam Bhadram Vo Yuyame Nripanandana Saurardhena Pritag Dharmas Tushroham Sauradhena Va. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear sons of the king, I am very much pleased by the friendly relationships among you. All of you are engaged in one occupation, devotional service. I am so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish you all good fortune. Now you may ask a benediction of me." Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Since the sons of King Prachinabarhishat were all united in Krishna consciousness, the Lord was very pleased with them. Each and every one of the sons of King Prachinabarhishat was an individual soul, but they were united in offering transcendental service to the Lord. The unity of the individual souls attempting to satisfy the Supreme Lord or rendering service to the Lord is real unity. In the material world, such unity is not possible. Even though people may officially unite, they all have different interests. In the United Nations, for instance, all the nations have their particular national ambitions, and consequently, they cannot be united. Disunity between individual souls is so strong within this material world that even in a society of Krishna consciousness, members sometimes appear disunited due to having different opinions and leaning toward material things. Actually, in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be two opinions. There is only one goal: to serve Krishna to one's best ability. If there is some disagreement over service, such disagreement is taken as spiritual. Those who are actually engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be disunited in any circumstance. This makes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very happy, and willing to award all kinds of benediction to his devotees. As indicated in this verse, we can see that the Lord is immediately prepared to award all benedictions to the sons of King Prachinabarisha. Om Agyanathamrandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Go Krishna Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I want to thank these son devotees and everyone watching online. Please let me get out of the way so I can glorify Srimad Bhagavatam and allow the Bhagavatam to do its work on our hearts, which, having come in contact with this material world, have been contaminated by envy. I'll speak for myself, by envy, disunity, in a many-branched version of my own personal selfish interests. And because of that, I may not always experience this situation wherein which the sons of King Prachinabarisha have so much pleased the Lord because of their cooperation. We have that famous pastime when Srila Prabhupada was leaving his body and wrapping up his pastimes, and there's this question of someone wrote Srila Prabhupada a letter, and every day Tamal Krishna Goswami would read these letters to Srila Prabhupada. And this letter to Srila Prabhupada was very sweet, but it was saying things like, Prabhupada, I want to give my longevity, I want to give my youth to you so that you could stay here longer. Just expressing so much love and fear of this imminent separation that the devotee felt for their spiritual master. And Prabhupada said, if you really want to show your love for me, then it's in how you will cooperate with each other to keep this movement moving forward. That this is real love for the spiritual master, because love means service. I was just listening to Dhanara Maharaj this morning, and he was saying, love, how was he? He was saying love is when our mind, right? There's different levels of love. It's like when the mind becomes fixed in this mudra, right? And he said, this mudra means these hands are for you. Right? And then when the mind beyond that, then the words of service, then physically, that I'm putting myself in a situation where I'm being used and engaged in service. Like this. And he said that love, the best type of love is service. Because he was speaking with this idea of sambandha jnana. That to actually understand our relationship with Krishna, I'm not going to be able to force Krishna to reveal himself to me. I'm not going to be able to force Krishna to reveal his intimate aspects of his personality, because as a person, he has the right, as he says in Gita, to reveal himself or to withhold himself from people that he chooses. Right? And then we can look at our own life. Who do I reveal myself to? Someone that I trust loves me, and what does that mean? That they're going to serve. They have this mood of service. That by me telling them I'm not going to be exploited or cheated, right? I'm not going to be taken advantage of. And so similarly, this type of mood of service, of cooperation, is really our practice, right? It's wonderful how direct Krishna consciousness is. My spiritual master says, in bhakti, indirect means direct. Indirect means most direct, because there's a way in which that in sadhana, we're indirectly practicing devotional service. Right? We're practicing, when we serve the deities in the temple, we're serving not Radha Krishna, right? Prabhupada says we're actually serving in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan, right? Because there's a barrier of my consciousness that's actually keeping me from creating offenses. So I'm gonna serve actually in this mood of awe and reverence, right? And at the same time, we're practicing to serve Radha Krishna. Right? This indirect actually becomes most direct. In a similar way, living in this world, in the society of devotees, learning how to cooperate with each other, right? Indirectly, we're in the material world, or in Ipsanayi, Michigan, or wherever we're in material bodies. But at the same time, we're cultivating this practice for what is going on in the spiritual world, right? A mood of cooperation, of service, of mutual service with each other. In this purport, I thought it was quite fun. Yeah, yesterday I wrote a little thing. We were having a discussion because of all the political things that are going on, and even how devotees become wrapped up in this kind of political fervor. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this idea of like what happened to the nuance of gray. And I think one thing that really gets to me is when there's an exhibition by devotees getting so wrapped up in the material things of the world to the point of which they start to criticize other devotees. Mm. To the point at which they start to create offenses then because of that. Prabhupada says in here, he says, where do we go? In the material world, such unity is not possible, even though people may officially unite, they all have different interests. And then he says, this unity between individual souls is so strong within this material world that even in a society of Krishna consciousness, members sometimes appear disunited due to their having different opinions and leaning toward material things. So it's not shocking and it's not bad that devotees have different opinions. That's to be expected because we're persons. In the spiritual world, these things are going on. You have right-wing gopis, you have left-wing gopis. And you have people that follow that mood throughout Vrindavan, throughout the spiritual world. But what is unbecoming is when we put too much emphasis on that. We put too much emphasis on the material leanings in the society of devotees. Too much faith and hope that this is what's going to really fix the problem, fix the solution. If we all have kind of the same political ideology, or if we have the same kind of political leaning, or if we have the same kind of material leaning, no. These things don't fix it. Actually, what it does is just creates more envy. And we'll see in the coming verses that the cause of disunity is really on the deepest level, especially material disunity. On the deepest level, it's from an inadequacy in our own self. And we'll see that. So, not to make things in the material world so important that when there are natural and expected different views of seeing things in the material sphere specifically, that it becomes such a divergence within communities. That communities then, feel the material world's going to happen. That's what the material world is, because people are fixed in their own selfish interests. So even when we have some official thing as the United Nations or any attempt at treaties within the history of war and countries, right? Not only were most of those treaties broken, are most of those treaties, broken and undercut, but they're always for selfish interests. It's the invested interests of each party. It's not the kind of wishful thinking that in this material world I can create some kind of utopic kind of experience. It's always going to miss the mark, because this material world is a place to facilitate our selfish interests. But as devotees, let us not put so much importance on that. Let us see that, okay, there's some different material leanings due to psychophysical upbringing, due to just, just whatever conditioning that we've gone through. But let's agree on one thing. Let's agree on service. At least to do service, because how to do service, but not to take that so seriously. I think it's so wrapped up in it as a means to kind of protect my identity. Isn't that what really argument and kind of the fear of embracing another's opinion? It comes from this idea of, well, this is my identity, this is who I am, this is how I serve, this is how I think. And because I'm scared to lose that, because I think if I embrace someone else's opinion or point of view, then I'm going to lose that. But it's my great once said, envy comes from forgetting that I have a relationship with Krishna. In other words, I think that I have to compete for Krishna's attention, that I have to somehow qualify myself to have a relationship with Krishna. In one sense, I have to remove the things that are preventing me from acting in that relationship. But the fact that I have a relationship with Krishna is an established fact. The fact that the living entity is connected to Krishna is an established fact. So I don't have to compete with anyone else to have my relationship with Krishna. No one else has to lose in order for me to win. Right? But we see, Prabhupada, he brings up the point in the purport in a few purports, of Indra. We see this example of Indra, and Prabhupada makes a statement. He says, after he gives one example, because as we'll get into, the Lord is instructing, as did King Prachinavartisha, instructing his children to create progeny. And so the Lord is saying, you've cooperated together, you've followed your father's instructions, and I'm also seconding what your father has said. And so you marry this girl, and this girl that they're going to marry was actually the daughter of a sage and an apsara. The sage was performing austerities, and the apsara was sent by Indra because the sage was going to usurp his position. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, it seems Indra does this a lot, to that effect. So we'll continue. Verse 9. The Lord continued, those who remember you every evening of every day will become friendly with their brothers and with all of the living entities. This is a community building. You remember the prachetas every evening. Next GC meetings, we can present that if you want your communities to thrive, remember the prachetas in the evening. Have pracheta katha. Everyone will become friendly.
SPT stands for Strategic Pracheta Time.
Strategic Pracheta Time. I'm always interested. I think to myself often, as I hear these, and I'm saying this out loud now, so I can be held accountable. There's the Srimad Bhagavatam. Just by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, there's so many Shruti Pauls that are given. The fruit of just hearing about Bhagavatam. And then there are things like, I remember I wanted to do it and I never followed through with it, but I'm meditating on the pastime of Gajendra. There's a verse about Gajendra. By awaking in the morning and meditating on Gajendra, all of one's bad dreams will go away. There's like little things like this. But I want to speak of hearing pastimes and achieving the fruit of love of God. This would actually be really nice. I want to become friendly with everything and everybody. So I'm gonna attempt to do this month. Try and remember the prachetas every evening. Okay, text 10. Those who will offer me prayers composed by Lord Shiva, both in the morning and in the evening, will be given benedictions by me. In this way, they can both fulfill their desires and attain good intelligence. Prabhupada says, good intelligence means going back home, back to Godhead. This is confirmed in the Gita. Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam dami bhuri yogamtam yenamam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. One who offers prayers to the Lord to fulfill his different desires, must know that the highest perfection of fulfillment of desires to go back home, back to Godhead. In this verse, it is indicated that those who remember the activities of the prachetas, the son of King Prachinavartisha, will be delivered and blessed. So what to speak of the sons of King Prachinabarisha, who are directly connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So this is seconding that point that I made earlier, that in Krishna consciousness, indirect means direct. Right? This is the way of the Parampara system. If we follow the Acharyas, we attain the same benefit as our predecessors. If one follows the decisions of Arjuna, he should be considered to be directly hearing Bhagavad Gita. There is no difference between hearing Bhagavad Gita directly from the Supreme Lord and following a personality like Arjuna, who formerly heard Bhagavad Gita directly from the Lord. Excuse me. Sometimes foolish people argue that since Krishna is not present at the moment, one cannot take direct instructions from him. Such foolish people do not know that there is no difference between directly hearing Bhagavad Gita and reading it, as long as one accepts Bhagavad Gita as it is, spoken by the Lord. However, if one wants to understand Bhagavad Gita by its imperfect interpretations, one cannot possibly understand the mysteries of Bhagavad Gita, even though one may be a great scholar according to mundane estimation. Yesterday, after Lokram gave a very wonderful class, and I had that question about, is our desires, our capacity to desire, limited by our karma? And David and I were discussing afterwards, we were discussing in the spiritual sense, right? My mind, in the material world, I can have a certain karma to be oriented towards a certain type of ambition, towards an extent of endeavor. Right? But in the spiritual sense, I'm reading right now Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, and these devotees were doing such amazing, outrageous things, right? Because they were tapped into the desire of Srila Prabhupada, which was unlimited because it was tapped into the desire of the Parampara. So because of that connection, right, one is actually allotted, has the opportunity to receive the full potency and the full expanse. Mahaprabhu's desire is unlimited, as is his anxiety due to living entities in Kali Yuga suffering in the minds of material nature. So in order to facilitate that, right, the devotee's desire expands for Mahaprabhu's service. The gopis had such a desire to serve Krishna that one night would not have been sufficient. So Krishna had to expand that single night into an entire day of Lord Brahma, and still that was not enough. And that's why Krishna's saying, I can't do anything to repay you. Your good deeds have to satisfy you. Just the very fruit and the sweetness of your devotion has to satisfy you, because I'm not able to accommodate the extent at which you want to serve me. And this is the competition between the devotees and the Lord. And so that wellspring is actually ready for us to tap into. That wellspring of desire, spiritual ambition, of the strength to endeavor and do things for Krishna that are actually beyond our physical capacity. It's available to us, and it happens when we tap into this parampara. That's why indirect is direct in Krishna consciousness. It's not that we're handicapped because I have to read Bhagavad Gita and Arjuna got to hear Bhagavad Gita. My consciousness may be handicapped due to my perception and the decisions of Arjuna. Following, when I hear Prabhupada say the decisions, I think not only is it like Arjuna's conclusion, which is often what Prabhupada refers to when talking about understanding the Gita, but also the position of Arjuna, that Arjuna was in, this mood of, I have no idea. I have no idea what to do. Everywhere I look seems wrong. It's full of faults. So I'm really ready to accept. I'm a clean slate. I'm ready to receive. And that takes energy. And unfortunately, I'm not always willing to put in that energy. So therefore, when I read Bhagavad Gita, I'm reading some words on a page. But it's actually Krishna's words. And it's directly, we can actually have the same benefit of directly hearing. Text 11. Because you have with pleasure accepted within your hearts the orders of your Father, and have executed those orders very faithfully, your attractive qualities will be celebrated all over. Right? And it's the quality of service. I can begrudgingly accept service. I can begrudgingly go through my sadhana and doing it. But cultivating happy sadhana, not that it's always going to feel good, but that I can orient my consciousness towards gratitude. That even when it sucks, it can be great. What did we, Bhakti Tirtha Swami said last night? He said, love isn't always pleasant, but this point of when there is a moment of like dissonance, when there is a moment of contention or hurt between the lover and the beloved, right? Between the friend and the friend, or between us and Krishna. Sometimes I can feel, I think I've spoken with many devotees. There's a sense of, why did Krishna do that to me? I can pretend like I'm this victim. Right? Or when it seems like Krishna is doing something that is very difficult and challenging for me, it brings me to the awareness that there's an opportunity to expand understanding, expand service, to expand and deepen the relationship. So there's a mood in which pleases Krishna, and that's when we accept within our hearts the orders of the spiritual master, the orders of the devotees, the orders of Krishna, Bhagavad Gita, very faithfully and with joy in our hearts. With pleasure you have accepted in your hearts the orders of your Father. And that becomes very attractive. When someone is serving just for the sake of service, it's very attractive. If I see someone serving because I know they want to posture themselves a certain way or get something, I'm less attracted to that. It's less attractive when I'm serving and I know I want something in return, or I'm talking to someone and I'm kind of subtly wanting to get something out of them. I'm less attracted to that activity. I'm less attracted to it's that feeling of invested or like kind of incentivized motive. It's less attractive for me. Purport. Since every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has small independence. Sometimes unintelligent men ask why one is put into a miserable condition, even though everyone is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because of his minute independence, the living entity can obey or disobey the orders of the Supreme Lord. If he obeys the Supreme Lord's orders, he becomes happy. If he does not, he becomes unhappy. Therefore, the living entity creates his own happiness or unhappiness. A big part of the false ego is coming to terms just with that reality. That the reality of it is that I'm a servant of Krishna. I have a certain function in the total view of reality. I have a certain function, and that is to serve Krishna. And Krishna offers that opportunity. And when I don't do that, I'm going to come up against friction. I'm going to come up against, just as the wagon wheel that is out of alignment. It's going to create friction, and that friction is going to create fire. And so similarly, when I'm creating too much friction in this material world, by acting contrary to what is actually most beneficial for me, then I'm going to create suffering. And so I'm creating suffering. Krishna is not doling out suffering to living entities. I'm creating suffering by acting out of alignment with my true nature in this material world. Krishna is not there, writing out our punishments for us. He simply established the material world in order to facilitate rogue living entities. And me being a rogue living entity and creating friction in that situation. And that friction is only to remind me that there's actually another place that I should invest my attention. There's another way to actually be than what I'm trying to do right now. Text 12. You will have a nice son who will be in no way inferior to Lord Brahman. Consequently, he will be very famous all over the universe, and the sons and grandsons generated from him will fill the 3 worlds. Text 13. O sons of King Prachinabarisha, the heavenly society girl named Pramlocha kept the lotus-eyed daughter of Kandu in the care of the forest trees. Then she went back to the heavenly planet. This daughter was born by the coupling of the Apsara named Pramlocha with the sage Kandu. Purport. Whenever a great sage undergoes severe austerities for material power, the king of heaven, Indra, becomes very envious. All the demigods have responsible posts for the management of the universal affairs and are very highly qualified with pious activities. Although they are ordinary living entities, they are able to attain responsible posts, like Lord Brahma, Indra, Chandra, and Varuna. As is the nature of this material world, the king of heaven, Indra, is very anxious if a great sage undergoes severe austerities. The whole material world is filled with such envy that everyone becomes afraid of his neighbors. Every businessman is afraid of his associates because this material world is the field of activities for all kinds of envious people who have come here to compete with the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, Indra was very much afraid of severe austerities performed by the great sage Kandu, and he sent Pramlocha to break his vow of austerities. A similar incident took place in the case of Vishwamitra. From other incidents in the Shastras, it appears Indra has always been envious. When King Prithu was celebrating various sacrifices, outdoing Indra, Indra became very envious, and he disturbed King Prithu's sacrifices. This has already been discussed in previous chapters. King Indra became successful in breaking the vow of the great sage Kandu, who became being thus successful in her mission. Pramlocha returned to the heavenly planets, leaving the newborn child to the care of the trees. Fortunately, the trees accepted the child and agreed to raise her. When I take my attention off of what I'm actually supposed to be doing, or rather, what I have the opportunity and the privilege to do in this material world because of the gifts that Krishna gave me, and I start to compare myself with what other people are doing, because of my removed attention on what I can do, what special gift I actually have to offer, then I feel envy towards people, especially if they're doing something similar to what I'm supposed to be doing. Because I've taken my attention off of what I can give, and I'm just seeing what other people are giving. And because of that misdirection of my attention, then that's where envy really arises from. It arises from artificially comparing myself with another person. And I say artificial because this goes back, I don't have to compete to make it to the spiritual world. There's not like a limited number of Krishna. There's not like a limited amount of Krishna that if I don't act now, right? There's tickets on sale for Hawaii. Super cheap. But there's only a limited number of those tickets. And if I don't act now, I could lose the opportunity to go to Hawaii. There's not a limited amount of Krishna that I'm not going to actually be able to have my relationship with him if I don't act fast. Even if my nonsense perpetuates me in this material world, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, God forbid, I always have an opportunity to have a relationship with Krishna. It's just my own nonsense that's not allowing me to do that. But when I forget that, when I feel like I have to compete for God's opulence, I have to compete in this material world to be the most beautiful, to be the most attractive, to be the most powerful. When I come into that consciousness of competition rather than cooperation, right? Then I'm putting myself again in the material world. Whereas creating an atmosphere of cooperation, of mutual upliftment, of win-win, where when I see other people doing wonderful service, I lift them higher. I support them more. What a gross feeling it is when you see someone and the thought is, I really hope they fail. What a gross feeling. And why do I want to maintain that? Why do I want to carry that more? Why do I want to continue to neglect my own gifts by not really seeing the opportunity that Krishna has given me to serve in a very unique and special and meaningful way? To serve in such a way that can actually satisfy the Lord? To serve in such a way that Krishna will actually be pleased, that the spiritual matter, that I can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the very gifts that Krishna has given me. Rather, I decide that I'm going to not look at that opportunity, and I'm going to look at what other people are doing better than me. I'm going to feel envy. I'm going to hope that they fail. That's such a gross feeling. And this is what gets Indra and many other people in this material world into so much trouble. This fact that Indra wasn't actually situated, leaning into his fullest potential, right? He is the most powerful person in heaven. And rather than actually living in that post and enjoying that, he sees some other sage doing some austerities, and he becomes occupied so much so that he sends his forces, he sends spies, he sends apsaras to go and disturb that person. That's time that he's not spending actually being Indra. Similarly, I'm not living into the fullest because rather than just doing what I do, or really refining what gifts Krishna has given me, really taxing my brain on how can I use this more, how can I expand my service to Krishna. Rather than do that, I'm thinking, oh, they're doing it so much better, I hope they fail, whatever. To whatever degree, right? It may not be as gross as I hope they fail. It may just be, oh, they're not that good. That's why it's not as good. Whatever, I'm criticizing, I'm rationalizing my envy in some way. Then I'm not spending time actually doing the thing that Krishna gave me to do. I'm not actually doing my service. So this comes from that kind of scarce mentality. And within scarcity, then I'm not going to be able to cooperate. Because cooperation entails trusting that there's enough. Cooperation entails that I know that my relationship with Krishna is a reality, and I just have to cultivate that. It can't be taken away by some circumstance. It can't be erased or revoked. It can be forgotten and neglected. And when I become envious of other people, that's exactly what I'm doing. It's the sad irony that the envy which arises kind of from the fear that someone's going to do it better than me, they're going to serve me, they're going to overpower me. The fear that creates that envy actually creates the exact reaction of what I'm fearing it's going to create. But I'm actually just, in other words, Indra is thinking these sages are going to usurp me. So then he steps down essentially from his post and gets meddled in some human affairs, right? With the example of Prithu Maharaj. What happened because of Indra's envy? It invited and brought in the inauspiciousness of upasampradayas. It brought about all inauspiciousness because he would disguise himself deceitfully as some kind of renunciate. And then that form of renunciation, because of Indra's potency, introduced this deceitful type of spiritual philosophy into the world. Because that's the thing, Indra is very potent. So then when his attention is misused, it has a very real and negative effect on the world. What to speak of the other, remind me if someone can, that other situation where then he was chased by that, huh?
Brihaspati.
Yeah, what?
When he offended.
He offended.
And then he does like 10 things there. This is the 6th cantus. Then he kills Tvashta, or he kills the son of
Yeah,
Tvashta,
just a whole.
Vishvarupa.
So because of that,
And he goes into the woman and tries to abort her child. Yeah, it does that. So many things.
jeez. All because he took his attention off of his post, his service, and he put it somewhere else, which stopped him from actually doing his service, and thus got wrapped up in so many things that actually derailed him from even being and relishing the King of Heaven. So there's a few more verses, and then we'll open it up for conversation. Just 2 more. Since all of you are very much obedient to my orders, I ask you to immediately marry that girl, who is so well qualified with beauty and good qualities. According to the order of your father, create progeny through her. You or the brothers are all of the same nature, being devotees and obedient sons of your father. Similarly, that girl is also of the same type and is dedicated to all of you. Thus both the girl and you, the sons of Prachina Varisha, are on the same platform, being united on a common principle. Prabhupada speaks in this purport about the quality of pramlocha, that it's very rare that a woman would marry multiple husbands, right? But we see that in the case of very elevated and powerful women throughout the history, like Draupadi and Pramlocha, that they actually have the capacity to support and nourish so many their husbands all at once and not treat them differently. Last part of the purport. One may act according to his own occupational duty just to satisfy Yajna Purusha, Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is called a pratag dharma. Different limbs of the body may act in different ways, but the ultimate objective is to maintain the entire body. Similarly, if we work for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we will find that we satisfy everything. We should follow in the footsteps of the Prachetas, whose only aim was to satisfy the Supreme Lord. This is called a pratag dharma. According to Bhagavad Gita, Sarva dharman pratijam mam ekam charan vraja. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. This is the advice of Lord Krishna. Our only aim should be to act in Krishna consciousness for the satisfaction of the Lord. This is oneness, or apratag dharma. And that's what will create real cooperation and unity. When we have the clarity around that purpose. And that's what will allow us to very nicely overcome and sail over the rough waters of disagreement due to being human. And that's, if we have our mind fixed in the goal, that's what will allow us to not give so much emphasis on the different points of views that may arise due to the material world being the place that it is. But it can allow us to really appreciate and see the essence and dedicate that and appreciate that when we see it in others. So we'll open it up for any reflections, questions. If anyone online has anything, please do write in. Even if it's just writing in a reflection, we'd love to hear from you. And we're in the live studio audience. Any questions or reflections?
I just like the simple point that you made about keeping the focus on gratitude in our sadhana. It's something that has occurred to me, I'd say fairly recently. One day I was chanting japa and then I finished I hadn't finished, but I was it was one of those days where you're getting your japa done late in the day. And I had this thought, oh, yes, I'm doing this for my Gurudev, you know? And then I realized, actually, that's the worst way to think about this. This is a gift that my Gurudev has given me. And it's really my job to somehow or other keep that in mind. And then when I can do that, then the whole kind of focus shifts around why I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, what I'm doing it for. Because really it's a matter of just realizing that I've been given this very, very nice thing, and it's a matter of me keeping it in the proper perspective. So I was appreciating when you brought that up. It wasn't really the main flow of, you know, the conversation, but
Yeah,
I really like that point.
Yeah. Oh, I'm doing my Gurudev a favor. I'm going to chant my japa. It's, that type of mentality really dries out the sadhana experience very quickly. Yeah, because it's not always going to be, you know, sadhana is not always going to be very easy, right? Krishna consciousness is simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. It's very confronting. But the more that my experience, the more that I can cultivate a spirit of, wow, due to this jaundice, I'm not able to actually appreciate the sweetness of what I've been given. Right? But let me know that. Let me remember that, at least theoretically, and let me then apply myself. And that type of consciousness, that type of awareness around our practice changes the quality of our practice dramatically and becomes very pleasing. So yeah, thank you for reflecting. Yeah, what?
You mentioned, like, especially with the first verse of how important it is, and Prabhupada also mentioned, and that was the whole course of his purport, how important it is to get along with people. And then you said something to the effect of how mutual service is very important. But the key word there for me is mutual. But more often than not, we see that, like I would claim that we put in the effort, but then the other side, they don't reciprocate with that. They don't, like, sometimes people like to disagree, and they like to not, they like to go against what you're saying. And then how can you move past that when people are complacent in their, like, to be contrary?
Well, we always have a choice of who we give our hearts to, especially in an intimate sense. And so being conscious of those choices that we're making, being conscious of who are the people that I'm really surrounding myself with, and I'm giving I'm investing my trust in, you know, hearing feedback from them or kind of, and if that's not there, for instance, if you're perceiving that, wow, this person's not actually, like, there's not actually a mutual relationship going on, then you have the free will and the choice to say, okay, well, I'm gonna change my interaction with this person. I'm not gonna become envious or hateful or resentful of this person, but I may just remove them. Or if it's, you know, if that's going on, then it could be an invitation to have a conversation. And maybe we find that, especially I'm speaking now in the sense of like intimate relationships, then it's a conversation. It's like, hey, I'm experiencing you. I experience you differently right now. You're not really, I don't feel the reciprocation of love. And that creates an opening for the conversation of, I'm really going through a lot of whatever. In terms of community, I'm thinking back to what Bhakti Kirtan Maharaj said last night, that when there's some kind of contention or sourness, right? It brings to my awareness that there's an opportunity right now to expand compassion, right? To expand and develop my own desire to serve just for the sake of service. To serve not with this idea of getting anything in return, And I actually mature from that. I grow from that. Whereas if I allow myself to get kind of preoccupied by the fact that they're not giving me what I think I should be given, then I'm going to be missing my opportunity to serve cleanly and nicely. And in terms of individuals that like to disagree, we don't have to play that game. I don't have to just disagree with you just because you disagree with me. We don't have to have that conversation. And if there's this attempt to, because sometimes that happens, especially in places like Facebook, where it's like, I want to disagree with you and I'm going to like drag you into this mud and keep, well, I'm not going to play that game. Right? We have to, it arises also from like having a higher taste, having a higher value. What do I value? I don't value just kind of arguing for the sake of arguing. I don't value dissension for the sake of dissension. And that's, I think, where it comes, a lot of, especially like college students that I'll speak to, or there's a sense of, what do I do about my association? And yeah, it can be very hard. But I think a big part of self-realization is taking responsibility for who you surround yourself with. A big part of spiritual life is taking responsibility for, I'm not just a victim of my circumstances at the whims and, waves of whoever I'm around and I can't help it. Right? No, I'm going to take responsibility for that. I'm going to cultivate relationships with people that I really want to cultivate relationships with. I'm going to deepen those relationships. I'm going to intentionally reach out. Right? And I'm not going to associate with people that I'm not inspired by or that I feel are detrimental to my advancement. And that's just me. It's not because they're bad or they're wrong. It's just where I'm at, what I'm needing. And to be able to like own that and be honest with that, I think is I've experienced it's a powerful way to really make advancement in Christian consciousness. By being responsible for our association. And being responsible for cultivating the relationships that we want to cultivate. Rather than allow a toxic thing into our life. But I'm gonna take responsibility for the type of relationship I want to create. So that could look as, just kind of as a practical example. It's like maybe there's a part of a relationship where there's just too much joking. Maybe there's not enough gravity. And I've had this with friends where it's like, we just kind of joke all the time. And that's kind of like our safe zone. We just like make stupid little jokes and we joke. Like actually me and Prana and Nagar, I remember we had a very specific conversation when we were on the ashram in Denver together. We came back from Harinam or some kind of program and it was just like, just like farting along, just like stupid little jokes the whole time. And we all kind of like sat back and we're like, wait, why is our relationship so kind of like shallow? Like, let's deepen it. Not that like, shooting the breeze and just kind of being very laid back is wrong. But right, we decided at that moment that we wanted to create a different dynamic in our relationship. Not one that was just superficial and kind of on the surface. We wanted to have a deeper connection on principle and to values. Right? So we can take responsibility to make the relationship that we want. And if when we propose that to the other person, they're a free and sentient being. If they're not willing to do that, then we have another choice to make. Like, okay, I want to create that somewhere. But if this person's not willing to create it, I can't force them to create that with me. But I do want to create that. So yeah, taking responsibility for our relationships. So Waira said, when you brought up disunity, the human workforce came to mind. Due to colonization, many old ways that encouraged principles of cooperation have gone underground. Is this a relatable understanding of disunity? So let me try to understand it. Due to colonization, many,
The Western world versus
yeah, totally. That encouraged principles of cooperation have gone underground. Okay, I got you. Is this a relatable understanding of disunity? The grounds of Machu Picchu in Cusco, Peru, come in mind as an example. The government choosing the city of Lima as the physical capital while the city of Cusco remains the cultural capital. Well, what has happened in kind of the spread of Western rugged individualism is that it's created this idea of scarcity purposefully, because that's what makes an economy move. Like, our economy is literally based on supply and demand. And so when you make things more scarce, then you create more wealth for some people. How much boba we receive from Whole Foods every week? Right? How much food does not go to some place? How much food is simply wasted? Yet still, a sweet potato is $3 or whatever it is. Right? Food can literally just be given out. There's literally not a scarcity of food, right? But we throw things away, we damage crops, we destroy things in this kind of consumeristic society in order to create some kind of artificial inflation of value, right? So that very kind of ideology is now being spoon-fed to nations all around the world. So like you're saying, this idea of the old ways and principles of cooperation, of abundance have really, it has really gone underground in a sense. So I would say it is a relatable understanding of disunity. But when we can fix our mind on the real goal of life, this is Prabhupada's argument to communism and so many other things. When we can actually fix our goal on fix our mind on the real goal of life, we can allow these other elements of disunity, these other kind of manipulated paradigms of the world to wash away. And we can really lean into how Krishna is providing. Because Krishna is enough for every single living entity in the universe. His holy name is enough for every single living entity in the universe. And so leaning into that, then our internal paradigm as communities, as individuals, can shift. And we can become empowered in then expanding that with the unlimited desire of Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada. So thank you for your question, Moira. I hope I responded. Any other questions or comments or reflections? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Thank you, devotees, for listening online, and thank you, devotees, for being here. Our voice to Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah.